Howdy everyone, Nimby here. I've got a special treat for you today. I'm going to show you a trick that my grandfather taught me on how to start a bike if it doesn't start. So if your bike won't start, there's really only 3 things that are going to stop it from starting, and we're going to go over the main one today, which is basically combustion or fuel. Most of the time it will be some sort of problem with getting fuel into your combustion chamber, either a carb problem, fuel injection problem, what have you. Doesn't matter if you're talking about a 30-year-old rotor tiller that you're trying to start up that's an old carbureted like Briggs & Stratton, or like a 2019 Harley Davidson. I don't care what kind of engine you got. All engines work the same, these 3 same principles, and this is going to help you diagnose why your engine won't start. First things first, we need an engine that won't start, and I just happen to have one. It's Fluff Butt, and she's been in the backyard for 3 weeks at about -20, and she hasn't started once. I know I feel horrible about it, but we're going to go and fix that today. So we're going to head out back there, and we're going to fix the no start issue with Fluff Butt. As everyone is probably well aware, I've been having some issues with her starting, which I think is to do with the fuel, and we're going to figure that out by going in there now and basically proving that it's a fuel issue with this simple trick that my grandfather taught me. So hopefully this helps someone else out that has a problem with a no start issue. Let's get to it and see if we can make her go. Okay, well, Fluff Butt here, she's been sitting for a good 2-3 weeks out in about -20. It's -17 now. It's March the 4th, and it's about time I get her fixed up. My main problem is I need to drain the oil in this thing, and at -20 that stuff's as thick as molasses, so the only way for me to properly drain the oil to do the repairs I need to do on her is going to be to heat up the engine. And the best way to heat up the engine is to run the engine. I can't run the engine unless I can start the engine, so that's our first problem. We're going to have to make sure I can get her fired up and running again. So come on, seriously. Okay. So anyway, in order to get her started here, we're going to need to make sure that we have basically 3 things. We have air to compress, we have fuel getting into the compression chamber of the piston, and we have a spark or electricity. Now we're not going to be able to make enough electricity with just the Kickstarter on this bike, just the way that it's designed. To get a good spark. You can start them without a battery, although it's exceedingly hard just because the stator is really weak. It's doable, not something we're going to be able to do very easily at -20. So we need to make sure we have some charge. Battery has been sitting out here without a trickle charger for a couple weeks and it's cold, so it's not going to be amazing. Let's turn her on, make sure we got enough headlight. We got headlight, got neutral light. Perfect. So that's all we need really to get a good start on this bike, is going to be to make sure I have a working headlight. If I got enough to power up that headlight, I should have enough battery juice to get a good spark to fire. So I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to assume that part of it's okay. Now we're going to move on to fuel. I know I have a fuel problem because I left the tank less than half empty and it got a lot of condensation, and the condensation got into the fuel bowl in the carburetor. And that's not good for gas or anyone or any sort of fuel burning apparatus. Water doesn't burn, water expands. So we need to fix that by draining the gas out. Again, we'll get to that. First we need to just see if we can actually get this thing started. So if you have any bike that you can't start, that you need to diagnose why the bike isn't starting, you're looking at 3 problems that are gonna, well, basically 3 problems that are gonna stop it from starting. It's either not getting fuel, it's not getting enough air, or there's a problem with compression, and timing and all that will mix in with the compression side of things, because if everything's out of time, the compression isn't going to happen at the right time, which will give you enough combustion to fire the piston back the other direction and give you locomotion. Anywho, today we're going to troubleshoot the fuel problem. So to do that, we're going to crack open the case here. Normally I would actually take it off of the boot right before the carb, because you want to get as close as you can to the throat of the carb bowl, to the venturi. I'm not going to do that today because at this temperature, 40-year-old plastics are about as brittle as eggshells, and I don't want to be breaking them. I'm going to take them off really gently when I take the engine out. But due to the temperatures, I'm just going to use the back of the airbox. Definitely not the most ideal conditions. You don't really want to be shooting that stuff into your airbox because it can degrade your filter. I got some spare filters, not really worried about it. In this case, with the temperatures out here, this is really my best option, is to shoot it into the airbox. So we'll give it a try, see how we go. If I'm right, the bike will start, run for a couple seconds, and die. And that will tell us for sure there is a fuel problem and not a problem with those other areas. We can concentrate on the fuel and move on. Okay, so all you're going to need to get a bike started is some type of quick start fuel. Basically, it's just a highly flammable liquid. You can use gasoline, you can use butane, you can even use propane, actually. You can use anything that is highly flammable to test this. This is just a product that's made for this. It works amazing. It's fairly cheap. It's like $5-7 a can. So why not use the proper stuff? But when I was taught this by my grandfather, he would just put some gasoline in an old pop bottle, pop a little hole in the bottom, squirt it into the carburetor, basically, you know, gasifying the gas, and it would start. So yeah, this is what we're going to be using. So to do this, we just have to simply remove the airbox, because we just basically need some access to the airbox. So that's all we really need, is a small hole to get the spray in. If you're obviously probably not running a CT90, but like regardless, whatever type of engine you're running, you're going to have to be able to find where the air filter is, and that's really where you're going to want to be spraying this stuff. Hopefully removing the filter, keeping everything clean so you don't get anything into the engine. This stuff is extremely flammable. Do not mess with it. And when you're working around anything gasoline, antifreeze, this stuff, that is a liquid at -20. You want to pay some respect to it, because it can give you frostbite quite easily if you spill it on yourself. Anyway, I'm going to spray this directly into the airbox, which is a crack I made here. We're going to give it a few kicks and see where we stand. It's a lot easier to do with two people if you have someone that can spray and the other person kick or run your starter button. If you didn't have an electric start, you just run the starter continuously. Well, there we go. Well, you can see she fires up and then dies. So we know that's a fuel problem. Otherwise, it wouldn't fire at all. It wouldn't, like, it kicked for a good couple strokes there. So we know that you're getting spark, your timing's okay, or it would have sounded horrible, and there's enough air compression to actually fire it up. So we've narrowed it down to one of those three things. It has to be fuel. If this works and lets your engine fire up for that couple seconds, your problem's a fuel problem. Hands down, has to be something like that. So now we drain the fuel. So this little hose hanging out down here, fuel drain hose. If you have a carburetor, I'm not sure, actually I don't think they have any sort of fuel drain hose on fuel injection system. And pressurized, so there'd be some sort of pressure release valve at some point. Anyway, you'll have a point where you can drain your tank. In my case, I'm going to drain it through here because it's going to run through the carb, and if I have any sort of junk build up in the carb, kind of gives it a forced bath, if you will, to hopefully wash out some of that crud into the gas can, like put fresh gas in. My issue at this temperature, with there being water in the gas, is at this temperature the water is a solid. Probably isn't going to come out of the system at all. It's probably frozen down the bottom of the tank and the bottom of my float bowl down here, which I'm hoping I'll be able to remedy once again I get the bike warmed up. or temperatures just get above freezing for a few days for me, where I can get it out. Anywho, let's get this drained. So it's pretty easy. Just need a sad looking jerry can like this. Put that in there, and there's a little flathead screw, not too unsimilar, that you'd open up to adjust your fuel mixture or your air mixture. And actually it's on the other side of the carb, so I'll be right back. All that fuel should drain out into that can. Now whenever you're doing work on your bike at minus 20, you want to be deliberate and slow with all your movements. Oh, of course I'm making a bling up. Why is that coming out there? Oh hell, I got the wrong hose. That's oh man, that's the air hose, the breather hose. That's the one right next to it. So yeah, don't do what I just did, or you'll have a mess like I got. Anyway, proper hose. Off a little bit. Inside the can. Very important. Let's open that up, drain her out. Alright, so you empty the petcock, or turn the petcock. You want to be deliberate and slow. Once you crack it, it doesn't take much before it starts flowing. Oh no. There it goes. Well, still got a little ways to go. See, the tank's actually pretty clean. See that one, the spout right there in the middle? That is your main fuel pickup. So when you run out of gas, that's all it is, just a tube that's above the tank in these things. The reserve is right there at the bottom of the tank, and that's where I was sucking up all the water. That's the top one. You can see there's not really much for rust in the tank. There's a few little spots, but I mean, overall for a 40-year-old tank, it's actually pretty in really decent shape. The reason there is some rust sticking in those spots around there is I put magnets, or heavy-duty neodymium magnets, underneath the tank. So if there's any rust when I'm driving around, in theory, it might stick there and save me pain like this when I'm out on the trails. Simply sticks up a little farther in the tank, so when you run out of gas, you got that last liter and a half or so of fuel for adventure. Now let's let this drain. So I'm hoping when we get this drained out that we'll be able to put some fresh gas in it. I know it's a fuel delivery problem. I don't know 100% whether something's mucked up in the carb or whether it's just the fuel itself with some ice crystals or other muck that ends up in there in the winter. But we're going to find that out just by simply draining the gas and putting fresh stuff in. I got a couple liters of fresh gas, so we're going to drain this out completely, make sure the lines are dry, put in the fresh gas, fill up the float bowl, kick her over a few times, see if fluff butt will start. Hopefully we diagnose the problem. I just closed off the fuel drain screw. So now we're going to put the fresh gas in, see how much luck we have. I'm just looking at the gas here. I don't see anything special with it, to be honest. There's a little bit of particles in the bottom, but probably from my old lawnmower stuff, to be honest. It's not the cleanest or nicest can. So, yeah, no telltale signs there. Sometimes you can actually see the water floating in the bottom, or when it's mixed up, it's got a more of a almost milky consistency. think about this. Use the joke. Anyway, as you guys can tell, it's clearly better. Well, there you go, guys. A little bit of diagnosis. Clearly the problem. Fires up good now. I'm gonna run in and have some dinner with the family. It's cold out and it's getting dark. That's good enough for me for the day. Thanks, guys.